consider this car class. It has a base price of $30,000 and a simple constructor that takes color and interior material and it creates a simple car. Now, if we were to change the base price for a car, let's say there is a discount for one customer, we could define a method, let's call it change base price, and we can just update the base price to a new price. So I would need to pass that new price here, and simple enough, we can update that. So just to test this out, let's create two cars. So I have a red car with fabric interior and I have a black car with leather interior, and the price of both of them is $30,000 to begin with. Now if I change the price of the first car to $29,000, now the first car is $29,000, second car $30,000, which is what we expected. But what happens if we have something like a Black Friday or some sort of sale that we want to put a discount on all cars of this type? That's when class methods come into play, when we want to update a property at the class level instead of instance level in this case. So to make this method a class method, I need to add the class method decorator, and instead of self, I will use the keyword CLS, which is class, but because we use the class keyword to define classes, we use CLS here. The other thing that I need to do, which is optional but it makes sense to do it, is to call this method on the class as opposed to the instance. Even if you call it on the instance, it still works the same way, but it is a lot more clear if you call it on the class. So if I print this out right now, you see that I get $29,000 for both of these classes, these instances, which means we applied this discount to every instance that is created from this class. Now, this is equivalent to writing something like car base price equals 29,000. And this is just a one-liner, so why would we need to create a full method and decorate it and all of that to achieve the same thing? The use case of class method is a little more clear when you need to do validations or some sort of checks that justifies creating a separate method for it. For example, let's say if new price that's entered is negative, like somebody creates a typo or something like that, then I don't want to update that price. So in this case, I'll print something like price cannot be negative. And then if that's not the case, then I will update that. So let's comment this out. So now if I run this now, we'll see that we got a nice warning, and also the price was not updated to the wrong number that was passed, which was negative. And if I switch that back, then we're fine. Everything is updated at the class level. So this is the first use case of a class method. The next use case is to define multiple constructors. What do I mean by that? Let me clear all of this up. So the way that you can define multiple constructors using class method is something like this. So different car companies usually give you option to pick different trims, so you don't have to select every single detail about the car, and you can just say I want trim 1, and then you customize a couple of things about them. So to keep it simple, we're going to have two trims. So the first trim is going to have fabric interior, and you just pick the color. The second trim for our car is going to have leather interior, and again, we choose a color for that. So if I define two cars using these two trims, and I will have a red car that is of trim 1 and a black car that has the trim 2. If you notice, we are calling this on the class, and so this is basically the car class. We're passing the color, which is nothing unusual, and then we are returning the class, which means in this case we're calling car and passing these two items, which is the same as calling this constructor method the same way that we would define the car if we didn't have a class method. So let's print this out, see what the interior looked like for this. So if I print this out, the first car that used trim1 has a fabric interior, and the second one has a leather interior. So that's what we mean when we say, using class methods, we define multiple constructors. So you basically have multiple options. Now, let's clean this up and quickly talk about static methods. Let's assume we have a method that doesn't do anything on the instance or the class. For example, let's say I have this honk method that just prints out honk. So we don't really need this self keyword here because we're not updating anything on this. But if we want to call this method, it will error out. Let me show you real quick. Alright, so if we read this error, what it is saying is honk takes 0 arguments, but 1 was given. So if I just scroll to show you. So what was the argument that was given? This is empty. Every time that you are calling a function on a instance of a class, you're implicitly passing the self keyword to it. That's why we never really need to pass the self keyword, because implicitly we are passing this car. It's the same as passing it here. So to make this work, we need to use static method decorator. What this means is this is not a method that's doing something on the instance. It's static. So if I call this same thing again, this works fine, and this is basically the first use case of static method. The common use case for static method is to use it to store methods that belong to a certain group. For example, if you have a utility class, or if you want to categorize certain methods to be under a singular name, you can use static methods. For example, let's take a look at this. Let me clear all of this up. This utils class. So let's say you have a lot of add and subtract and similar names all across your code base, but you want these add and subtract method to be separated from other ones so they don't override each other. So one way to do it is to define a class, and it's not a class that you're gonna necessarily instantiate or anything, but when you're accessing these methods, you access them through that class. Basically, it's as if you're putting the names under a parent name, so you don't have to worry about them overriding some name by mistake. So the way that you would call this is utils add, let's say 1 and 3. So this is one way to use a static method to organize your code. I hope this video helped clear out what static methods and class methods are used for in Python, and I'll see you next time.